Hello, I'm Maximo San, the head of PR of SMB, a mining company of Columbine tantalum, commonly known as coal, in the region of Kansas. As our 2020 strategy, we are doing this promotional video, trying to educate people on this interesting resource and trying to promote this industry in this incredible country. Columbine tantalum is a widely used resource, but it's not a really well-known one. It's used in all the electronic items and is used from phones to jet engines to pacemakers, and without it, our digital world would not be able to exist. However, even if the main exporter of this resource is Australia, 80% of the reserves are found in the Congo basin. Therefore, our company's mission is try to exploit this resource locally in the DRC. Coltan is a resource to mine, which has allowed rebel groups to exploit it to maintain their power. This not only increases violence, but is incredibly detrimental to the environment. As this mining is illegal, these groups cannot supply themselves, so they rely on bushmeat hunters. This has caused, for example, the gross gorilla population to fall by 96% in the last 3 years. This mining, however, is really sporadic and creates uncertainty for the workers who lack jobs or prospects. As Blaine Hardin said, for the people of the DRC, there is only one thing worse than mining coltan, and that is not mining coltan. This is how SMB started, as a way to give these people economic opportunities while providing conflict-free minerals. Coltan mining companies bring economic and industrial growth by allowing the legal sale of the resources, which later benefits society by maximizing government revenue and the gradual industrialization of the country. It will also end bushmeat hunting, as miners can supply themselves legally, saving many species from extinction and reducing contraband. However, given the tragic story of the DRC from the times of the Congo Free State, we know the suffering this country has experienced. As a part of our social compromise, we want to make a documentary on the complex history of this country with coltan, to raise awareness of this issue and the importance of legal mining.
Bonjour, je m'appelle Françoise Laberger, and I'm going to tell you how it came to be that my family moved from Belgium to Congo in a coltan expedition in the 1980s. So it all started in 1870s when Belgian King Leopold II privatized the Congo and sent Henry Stanley to navigate the Congo River to the Atlantic Ocean. In 1884, he was given Congo at the Conference of Berlin. However, after a rule in 1904, Roger Casmon's famous paper showed that over 10 million people had died due to indiscriminate war, starvation, and tropical diseases. And because of this, in 1908, Leopold II had to relinquish private control. However, we still ruled in Congo through the colonial trinity of the state, the missionary, and private company interests. But things started to change in the 1940s and 50s when the Congo experienced a new unprecedented level of urbanization and the colonial administration began. This led to a new middle class. However, they came with new ideas, as they had new questions of self-governance. As in 1958, Patrice Lumumba, among others, started the Mouvement National Congolais. And Lumumba took ideals of Pan-Africanism from Ghana's Nkrumah, which led to nationalist revolts, which reduced our power, Belgium's power, in the country and eventually led to the independence of Congo in 1960, with Patrice Lumumba as the Prime Minister and Joseph Kasavubu as the President. However, of course, us not being there, the country was very unstable, with regional tribal leaders holding much more power than the central government, and with no bureaucratic, well-trained bureaucracy. To restore order, Patrice Lumumba turned to the Soviet Union as part of the Cold War for aid. However, neither us nor the US liked this, so we made sure to have him killed in 1961. And the US helped Mobutu in 1965 take power through a coup. Now, Mobutu was also a big fan of Pan-Africanism, so he changed the country's name from Congo to Zaire, and he changed his own name to Mobutu Sese Seko, as we know him. He also nationalized foreign-owned firms and forced the European investors out of this country. Now, here's karma, when the foreign investors had to be invited back, as the Katagan rebels invaded the Shaba region of Congo, and Mobutu needed our help. So he invited the foreign investors back. That's when my family came, as well as we helped along with the French and the Moroccans to repulse the attack on Katanga by Angola-based rebels. He successfully repressed any opposition in his rule in the 80s. Now, In 1989, Zaire defaulted on loans from Belgium, which resulted in a cancellation of our development programs and increased the deterioration of the economy. On another note, in the 1990s, there was an increasing demand for electronics, and thus coltan, which my family extracted, was also in high demand in the Congo. Mobutu was weakened by a series of domestic protests, heightened international criticism of his regime's human rights practices, a faltering economy, government corruption, and his own embezzlement, and he slowly started to give up power through co-opting and efforts to puppeteer the opposition, but failed and wound up having to share power. Now, in 1996, there was the First Congo War, which was due to conflicts between Rwanda and Zaire, as Rwandan refugees came in and started to use their refugee camps as ways of incursion back into Rwanda. And when Rwanda invaded Zaire, Mobutu lost his power, and in 1997 the war ended and Laurent Désiré Kabila took power and renamed the country the Democratic Republic of Congo. Now, it's important to note that this war, which did not start by the vast mineral wealth in the Congo, was largely contributed to and sustained by this, as mining coltan had extended the conflict, with militias using this wealth generated from the trade of coltan to finance their military agendas. And these conflicts also affected and threatened the Congolese sovereignty.
The Second Congo War broke out in 1998, in which 8 African nations, the DRC, Uganda, Rwanda, Burundi, Namibia, Zimbabwe, Angola, and Chad, and 25 other rebel armies, participated in the largest interstate war in modern African history, the African War War. The abundant resources alone did not lead to war, but rather the following events did. The eastern provinces of Kivu and Ituri were populated by a high concentration of diverse ethnic groups, many of which have a long history of hostility dating back to the days of ethnic revolts built by King Leopold. Ethnic tensions increased after the 1994 genocide in Rwanda and the state hostilities in Burundi. When the Hutus fled to the NGO's eastern areas, the refugee camps were penetrated by Hutus militants from Terahaniwe, who carried out a mass murder of Tutsis. The second crucial factor in the beginning of the ethnic feasibility was the union of rebel armies, the installation of a new rebel leader, which was Laurent Kabila, as a result of a union of the rebel groups in the eastern Congo, that they overthrown the then weakened president Joseph Mobutu in 1997. Then, government militias in Burundi, Rwanda, and Uganda demonstrated their disloyalty to Kabila by independently supporting rebel movements in the east and bringing the armed forces into the region. Then, the region was further civilized by the entry of so-called peacekeeping forces from Chad, Zimbabwe, and Angola and Namibia. Without order in this area, the region abundant resources were squandered. The fortuitous discovery of coltan in the DRC, which came with the technological boom of the 90s, meant that the rebel armies in the east had more than enough funding to support their armies. To understand the role of coltan in this African war, one must first understand how local global supply chain created by activities of rebel forces sustained the coltan trade in Congo. In August 1998, Kabila's former allies began to fuel a new rebellion against the DRC leadership through the Congolese Democratic Rally, which is the RCD, a rebel group composed of many former AFGL members. The RCD faced significant opposition and did not succeed to overthrowing Kabila as easily as they had hoped. Instead, the conflict escalated into what has been described as African First World War, in which regular armed forces from the DRC, Zimbabwe, Angola, and Namibia fought on one side, with some involvement of Chad and Sudan, and Rwanda, Uganda, and Burundi supported the rebel forces in the other. In 1999, the ceasefire agreement in Lusaka and the deployment of a UN peacekeeping mission failed to end the conflict. Up to 14 armies continued to fight on Congolese territory until 2003, each supporting one or more of Congolese rebel movements. The conflict, de facto, divided the country into 5 main areas of control, with most of the fighting occurring between different armed groups in the east of the country and behind the Lusaka ceasefire line. The inter-Congolese dialogue eventually led to withdrawal of foreign forces and a series of peace agreements between 2002 and 2003. However, thousands of civilians continued to die in a subsequent political transition period due to unresolved local conflict and rivalries. In December 2002, the Pretoria Agreement made between Rwanda and the DRC called the withdrawal of Rwanda troops from the DRC in exchange of an international commitment to the disarmament of the Hutus. Less than a month later, the Uganda government's presence in Congo ended with the signing of the Badolite Agreement, which brought about ceasefire between three rebel groups supported by the Uganda government. However, approximately 18,000 armed rebels remain in the states of North and South Kivu, precisely where most of Coltan is extracted from the Congo. From these 18,000 rebels, the condition of war continued, as supported by the United Nations in 2003 and the end of the war. The rebels' main motive is to extract maximum commercial and material benefits from the area, and unmonitored practice that has led to the exploitation of resources. To date, the strategies employed by the DRC government in the north and south of Ituri have been restricted by the region's rebel groups. Fighting among the rebels currently presents in the most serious security problems in the region. The destructive presence of Coltan in Ituri and Kivus, as well as other natural resources in the Democratic Republic of Congo, must be addressed.
In Global Witness, we have a lot of companies like yours that came to us to ask us for advice about how to enter the exploitation of minerals industry in the region. We are definitely a global organization, but we have done a lot of detailed report on the field, and we are very specialized in the DRC and the exploitation of coltan. So that's why whenever we have companies like yours that came to us for advice, we always tell them the exact same thing, which is to please look carefully into the next two dynamics, that by avoiding them we can bring major changes for both the company and definitely the society and the country. So the first one, it is corruption. To please look and take into consideration how corrupted is the DRC. The DRC ranks in the 30th position of the most corrupted countries in the world if we looked into the Transparency International Corruption Perception Index. And we did a report that is very self-explanatory in the year 2017 that concluded that in between the years 2013 and 2015 there was more than $750 million that were supposed to go to the state, that was supposed to go to the Congo's tax agencies and the state-owned mining company Jeka Mines, that just simply disappeared. And we have strong evidence that suggests that this money that was supposed to go to the public funds and was supposed to go to improve the public services in the DRC, it was money that went directly to the political elites and to people with very high and strong connections with the former president Joseph Kabila. And corruption, it is very sad anyway, but it is even sadder when we are talking about a country that has such a extreme and higher level of poverty, and that this money was supposed to help people to get out of poverty. And at the same time, it's definitely no coincidence that whenever we are talking about a country that is very rich on natural resources, we see strong and high levels of corruption, that it peaks at corruption. So we please ask you to please not be corrupted. And the second issue or dynamic that we ask you to break, it is the problem with intermediaries. And because we often see this dynamic, companies hire an intermediary that might be clean, that might be a good man or a good woman, we don't know, but this intermediary usually gets supplies from warring parties, from either the rebels or the national army. And at the same time, these parties use very not nice methods for exploiting for exploiting the minerals. They are actually very violent in their means. And that's what happens when you're talking with warring parties. So we ask you to please be very careful about not only who you are directly hiring, but who your intermediaries are hiring. And with that and avoiding corruption, you can do major changes in the DRC.
Hello, my name is Sonata Garrasi. I'm the Director for Political Affairs in the Office of the United Nations Special Envoy for Great Lakes. As you may understand, the situation in the Democratic Republic of Congo is a very complex one. given the many actors involved in the conflict as well as the challenges that we are facing. However, within the United Nations, we're focusing on addressing this issue in the best manner possible and attempting to guarantee that peacemaking and peace building is effective and aids at stabilizing the situation in the region. We have been working closely with the African Union when it comes to humanitarian affairs and collaborating particularly with the peace, security and cooperation agencies of the organization. Since 1999, at the United Nations, we approved the creation of the United Nations Organization Mission for the Democratic Republic of Congo, nowadays known as MONUSCO. It has been operative since that time, which back then was responsible for the peace agreement and the ceasefire going on in the country. Nowadays we have over 8,000 Peace Corps deployed in the territory, and we're responsible for a wide variety of actions including human rights, child protection, the DDR measures, justice support, military affairs, political affairs, civil affairs, among others. Since 2013, we have been working closely on the role of development in this conflict, as we push for the signature of the Peace, Security and Cooperation Framework for the Democratic Republic of Congo. That same year, we approved the deployment of an intervention brigade that oversees closely the escalation of conflict in the territory. At the same time, we have been working on undertaking good offices and strengthening the relationship with the parties in the field who are involved in the conflict, as well as fostering agreements that revitalize the implementation of existing accords and promote regional economic integration. However, we are facing complex issues, as I mentioned before, as we have had to deal with criminal groups linked with transnational organized crime, involved in large-scale smuggling and laundering of resources. Now, one of the biggest challenges that we are facing within the United Nations itself concerns addressing lines of corruption of our own Peace Corps, as some of them have been involved in illegal trade of gold and other minerals, including Coltan. This has led for a huge need to restructure the deployment. Yet we're focusing on guaranteeing that these peacekeeping operations are effective and aid at stabilizing Congo. Thank you very much.
Hello and welcome back to our channel. You may be wondering, what is going on in Congo at the moment? Well, you're about to find out in this segment. In October 2008, rebel forces captured major army bases of Rumangabo. The Congolese government accuses Rwanda of backing up Tutsi rebel leader Laurent Nkunda, a claim Rwanda still until now denies. In 2008 November, UN Security Council approves a temporary increase of troops to bolster the strained UN peacekeeping efforts in the east. In July of 2010, there was a debt release approved by the World Bank and IMF of $8 million. In 2010 November, Paris Club of Creditor countries scrapped half of DR Congo's debt. There was a presidential and parliamentary elections in November 2011 where Mr. Kabila gains another term. The vote is criticized abroad and the opposition disputes the results. In February 2013, representatives of 11 African countries signed an accord in Ethiopia pledging to help and end the conflict in DR Congo. The M23 rebel group declared a ceasefire ahead of the talks, and its leader, Bosco Ntaganda, surrenders the following month. In July of 2013, 3,000 members of the UN Intervention Brigade deployed to fight and disarm rebels in the east. In January 2015, dozens are killed in protests against the proposed electoral law changes which the opposition said were designed to allow President Kabila to remain in power. In November of 2016, a political deal was signed between President Kabila's ruling coalition and the opposition to delay the presidential elections until 2018 sees Prime Minister Augustin Matata Ponyo and his cabinet resign, paving the way for a new cabinet to include opposition figures. In In December of 2017, DR Congo is expecting a mega crisis, with conflicts having forced 1.7 million people to flee their homes during the year. Aid agencies say that DR Congo is the worst affected by the conflict displacement in the world. In March 2018, main opposition Union for Democracy and Social Progress chose Felix Tshisekedi as its candidate for the December presidential elections. In June 2018, government asked commissions to look at disclassifying parts of the Virunga and Solongo national parks, both UNESCO World Heritage Sites, for oil exploration. Environmentalists claim that drilling would endanger wildlife and contribute to global warming. August 2018, governing People's Party for Reconstruction and Democracy chose former Interior Minister Ramanzi Shadari as its presidential candidate, as President Kabila could not run for another term. January 2019, officials declare opposition candidate Felix Tshisekedi the winner of December's presidential elections, prompting protests from rival opposition candidate Martin Fayulu of a deal with the government, whose candidate Emmanuel Ramanzi Shadari came third. More than 1 million Congolese were unable to vote in the presidential elections because voting in 3 areas was postponed to March 2019, officially because of security and concerns over an Ebola outbreak in the east. Tshisekedi's victory over opposition was disputed by an independent observation mission from the Catholic Church, showing leaked data from the state-controlled Electoral Commission and gathered data by the Church show that Fayulu won with about 60% of the vote. Fayulu's supporters from an array of opposition political parties protested in many cities across Congo. Security forces often responded to protests, some with violent and excessive and lethal force. Well, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you for watching, and we hope you have a great night.
As we have seen, the DRC has had a tremendous story. Therefore, SNB will try to promote the Angolan diamond model that will ensure that not only legal mining is done, it will prosecute illegal miners, but it will create credible certification that would allow the mining industry to flourish. Using Angola as a test case, we could see this would promote economic growth and will ensure a better development. For our part, SNB, since our 2014 founding, we have not only created formational schools, but we have built bridges, and we are looking up for a bright future of the DRC.